Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of the Silver Liming. My name is Anne Desjardins. I'm your host here, and I really put together this podcast, if you've not heard me say this in the past, as a means to give people some hope, additional information, insight into how to heal from things like Lyme and tick-borne illness. By no means is this to be any true standard medical advice, but take it for what you will and get from it what you need, because I really do like to share a variety of different people's stories to help you to get some insight into the things that are required to help yourself get into a better health state. And I know from my own experience living through tick-borne illnesses, how horrible it was, how dark it was, how scary it was. And I would often attach myself to these types of stories about people getting better, people recovering, people who have worked with people who have figured out how to help people heal. And that was my tackling fuel. That was really a big component for me in terms of getting better, is that I chose to set my sights on things like that and believe and have the faith and understanding that it is possible to get better, even in the darkest days when it felt like that was nearly an impossible feat, but it is quite possible. And I'm just really grateful to be here in a healthy capacity to share, again, information with you. And it's very important that we get this word out here. I believe 400 to 600,000 people a year just in the United States alone are infected with tick-borne illness. And that doesn't even begin to encompass the population that has other things going on, like mold toxicity, environmental toxins, parasites, various different pathogens like overgrowth of candida, SIBO, all these different things that people have maybe as underlying root causes. And it's just really not, I think, interconnected enough for people to be able to understand the actual root cause of things. And I often wonder, why do some people get so sick from a tick bite versus others? And I do think I've come to the realization that we all have a bucket, if you will, that can only hold so much in terms of toxins until the dam bursts and it just breaks and our immune system tanks and crashes. And so how do we regain our health? How do we recover our position as a functioning human, having the energy to have fun and joy in life, let alone accomplish the things that are maybe not as fun, such as work or menial tasks that we need to do just to survive. But I can remember a lot of times, again, not even having energy to get up to eat, to brush my teeth, to get ready for work, to do standard things that I would watch my neighbors doing and wonder, like, how are they able to do this? Why can't I do this? I'm not understanding this. So, it's just, again, really important for us to understand how all of this ties together. My guest today, I think, will help us to really see that a little bit more clearly. Greg Lee, he's the founder of Lyme Research and Healing Center. Thank you, Greg, for being here with us. And he had gone through his own health crisis and really understood the importance of getting to the root cause of what was happening to him. And I think that really lends well to what he's created now in the Lyme Research Center to help people to heal from things not just Lyme related, but some of the, again, underlying root causes as to why possibly they've tanked so horribly with their health, and figure out ways to regain their composure and their self. So Greg, thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate your time. And I think, again, what you're going to share with the listeners is incredibly valuable. I know you had asked what was one thing that you could share with people. And I was like, well, a lot of people ask me how to get better. And so, I'll leave that to you in terms of really explaining a little bit more about how you work with people and the different kinds of treatments that you provide to people, and just regaining, again, their health, because without our health, we really have nothing. We can have all the riches in the world. We can have the best lover, the best partner, the best family, the best kids. And it really doesn't matter if you don't feel well. You're really struggling to enjoy that. So again, thank you for being here. And I look forward to this discussion.
Oh, thank you for having me on, and it's a great pleasure to be here and love to talk about what's working to help people get better, because that's what we're all about here. We have a like 8 stages that we look at in each patient. And what we use is an advanced scan to identify what are the most important things to treat first. So we look at over 1,000 different infections, toxins, inflammatory compounds, 100 regions of the brain, functional medicine issues, detox blocks, where things are, the immune system may be dysregulated, neurotransmitters. So we look at a lot of different things to try to get a sense of what is the biggest issues that need to be treated first. And with that, that's kind of our first stage. Identify what needs to happen because many of our patients will come in with 3-ring notebooks full of lab tests and remedies they've taken, or they bring in shopping bags full of supplements they bought. And, that I tried this, it did work, and this and this. And it's just like the very piecemeal kind of thing. And a lot of it is because they think they have, I have Lyme, so I'm going to treat Lyme. And what we often find is that yes, these patients have Lyme and they also have Epstein-Barr, they have parasites, they have Babesia, they have recently we're getting more anaplasmosis patients. And it was just like seeing different trends emerge through our scanning of these patients. And often, because I look back at my records and for 300 records, none of my patients were tested for anaplasmosis by their docs or their Lyme docs. It was just not on their radar. And so I was really surprised. It's like, whoa, we're getting more and more of these showing up. And also saw some like statistics saying like, oh, we're seeing more of that in like New York and things like places like that. So the first stage is what do we need to treat? What's the highest priority? And that's what we use the scan for. And then we can also create a model of the patient and then test remedies and treatments against that to see how effective they may be. And after that, we often find that most patients are lacking energy. They need mitochondrial energy. They need hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, thyroid support because basically we don't get people who've just been mostly early. We get people who've been like, I live near Lyme, Connecticut, and I've been sick for 30 years kind of patients. And so it takes a huge toll on their energy system. And that's almost the first step that needs to happen because you need energy to detox. You need energy to fight infections. And where I am in Maryland, there's 40 different Lyme literate practitioners. And almost and when I look at what they're giving the patients that come to me, there's very little for energy support. There's very little for mitochondrial, replenishment. So that's often stage two. And then stage three is since the patients have been in treatment a while, it's to get their detox pathways open because the liver and gallbladder are often congested and or toxic. The gut has leaky gut or SIBO or SIFO or parasites. The skin, like a lot of patients come in and they're like all these huge rashes and they're like, it must be Bartonella. And in a significant number of them, they're have so many blocks to detoxification, they're just detoxing out their skin. Like I had a woman recently, she came in and she's like, I have a really bad, body odor and I think, oh, I have Lyme, I'm diagnosed with Lyme, but all my other tests are negative. And so the tests that we did showed, yes, you do have Lyme and you also have viral and you also have parasitic infections and your detoxification pathways, your liver and gallbladder is really congested. And so part of what we do in the detox treatments are things like cupping and bloodletting. We're actually pulling out toxic blood out of the patient and it comes out not like normal blood, but it actually comes out like jello in really toxic patients, like a big blob that just sits there. And at first, people are like, whoa, what is that? That really is in me? And I had one man, he came in and he basically was in a wheelchair, had an MS diagnosis, also multiple tick-borne infections. And he was like 300 pounds. And basically, he couldn't do very much because his body was so toxic. And so me, his wife, his two, younger kids got him on the table and we did this cupping procedure on him. And the blood came out like jello, like over 15 of these cups. And afterwards, his wife said, after that treatment, he could feed himself for the first time in 3 years. And his hands went from like this purple, mottled, very sickly looking to looking normal. Like I was just like, whoa. And he goes like, I feel like you pulled concrete out of my veins. So it's this is not only you're getting the toxins out, but the next stage is getting the inflammation and drainage pathways open. So often the lymphatics are congested. So there's many remedies and treatments like the cupping will also help, but essential oils, we love essential oils. There's so many ones that are so great for like liquefying the congestion. I do trainings on, teaching practitioners how to use essential oils for their patients. And I had this chiropractor, he goes, I had this one patient with a congested liver, and I did what you said about using eucalyptus globulus essential oil. And one of the ways we deliver it or teach how to deliver it is through a laser, actually. So you put the oil in front of the laser and the frequencies go in. So this is great for chemically sensitive mast cell activation patients that they can only eat like three foods because their system's so reactive. But the laser frequencies don't trigger that reaction. And so this chiropractor was lasering this patient's liver, and he heard it go gurgle, 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 gurgle. And the patient had this huge dump out of their liver into their small intestine. And they were like, whoa, what was that? And so what that is you're opening up the drainage pathways, fairly quickly with these essential oils because a lot of them really break up congestion and stagnation, especially according to like the Chinese medicine properties. And then the next phase, which is dealing with the most chronic symptoms of like pain, anxiety, the ones that insomnia, what are the things that are keeping them from feeling better? Because once we got the detox pathways open, they can drain the inflammation. Now we really want to balance things like neurotransmitters. We want to help them to feel like, hey, I can sleep, I can have less pain and I can like think and my brain can work. And then that's like the fifth stage. The sixth stage is actually going after infections. So we want to make sure we can get drainage, get all the stuff out. They have energy. Then when we start killing things or using antimicrobial remedies, then we often start sometimes at a very low dose. So it could be essential oils, could be homeopathic, could be what do we do? We take herbal remedies and we put them into tiny particles called microparticles. And it's microemulsions or liposomes. And those penetrate deeper in the cells. They go into biofilms. They go deeper. They go into the blood-brain barrier more quickly, and therefore they can help relieve those, get to the hidden infections faster. And by using these in a titrated dose, starting low dose, we help reduce the big Herx reactions. And so the patient can handle it because now all their pathways have been hopefully working and open, and then they can titrate up based upon what they can handle. And if it's too much, then they cut back on their dose. And that way we find that it's more empowering for the patient. They feel like, okay, oh, they learn about their body and how it works and how it, what speed, what dosage, what frequency they can use to become more functional. Because ultimately our goal is to help patients become more functional and not just kill the infection. Because almost every one of my colleagues, there's nothing wrong with, kill the infection. And you got to deal with like the other things I'm talking about, the toxins, inflammation, drains on the energy, the emotions, the neurotransmitters, and all that. And so after we have really started to really reduce the infections, then we work on healing and regeneration because often there's damage into the different organs, the brain, the cells, the circulatory system. So we use frequency specific microcurrent frequencies. They have a repair and regeneration frequency of 124. And then we can combine that with different frequencies for targeting like the regions of the brain, like the basal ganglia in like OCD PANS PANDAS patients. Or like if a person has like really a lot of leaky gut, Then we can send it into the ileocecal valve, the small intestine, the colon, and really help those to heal more quickly, get the inflammation down. There's inflammation lowering frequencies, there's antitoxin frequencies, there's different frequencies for fighting different kinds of infections, viral, bacterial, spirochete, parasitic, mold, fungal. And so based on what we find in the scan, then we can really start to super target those things in each patient. And that really helps patients to feel like, wow, I'm getting better. I'm feeling like, my brain's working, I have more energy, I have more stamina, my digestion's, I'm, able to poop every day or whatever it is that the challenge that they were dealing with. And then the last stage is kind of like a more kind of out there kind of stage is clearing the bad energies and the bad spirits that can affect people. Now, there's different healing systems in Chinese medicine. I'm also trained in something called Sufi healing, where they talk about there are energies that can affect your healing. And so these are things that are not that come in from the outside that need to be then cleared out from each patient. And these are the patients that say, like, I feel like something's gotten in me and it's not getting out, or I'm not who I used to be anymore. I used to be the strong one and everyone could depend on me. And now I'm just feel like I'm just nothing like what I was. I'm a shell of my former self. And so that's often a sign that, that they need some sort of clearing of this method. And so it's through these 8 stages, they're not happening in sequence. They're often sometimes happening all at the same time, depending on where the patient is. We help get the person, out of where they need to be like just cleaned out and drained and detoxed to a place where they're okay, now we're energized, we're happier, our brain's working. Okay, now the infections are starting to get addressed. And then as that happens, then it's like, wow, that's often where they see bigger gains. And then also in that infection phase, we're also dealing with the biofilm forms of infections. And then the regeneration, depending on what we find in the scan or rescans, often patients often may get multiple scans where they need help in terms of, often in the brain or in their joints, if they have like, arthritic kind of conditions, or in different organ systems like the gut, the liver, and things like that. And then clearing out the bad energy. So that's kind of like our process that we go through when we take patients through their different healing stages. So,
Yeah, that sounds really awesome because again, I'm trained more in a regenerative approach to healing the body. And I value a lot of what you're saying in terms of just figuring out what's there. How do we open the body up to clear properly? Because I think that's really a step that's not taken into consideration for people. And I know just from my Ayurvedic studies that a lot of times people will see it like, oh, this detox kit, let me try it. And okay, great, I'm going to start detoxing, but we're just moving toxins from point A to point B in the body, and we're not actually moving them out of the body because those channels are not open, and we can almost do sometimes more damage than good in that effort. And also, I like the fact that you're saying to go slowly because I know oftentimes too, like especially having lived it, I was like, die. I want to kill this stuff, like die, drop those nuclear bombs, baby. I don't care. Give me 4 antibiotics at the same time. Yes, but like that's really not that exciting as you're the person experiencing it, and your body too is like we are designed to have a specific balance in our bodies, and when we're dropping nuclear bombs on it like that, that's really altering not just the stuff that shouldn't be there. And so it can be very hard on people's systems. um and then essential oils, I mean, you touch on that, like I I I used a lot of essential oils, and I think that really helped me a ton because I think as you're alluding to with microdosing and making the micro, what was,
particles.
thank you. It's a little bit more challenging to get into like our brain or the white matter or cartilage because it's not readily penetrated by oxygen, and therefore a lot of the particles are too big to get into those spaces. But I found that the essential oils really serve that purpose incredibly well to be able to get into those small places easily. And I'm curious, you had talked about finding an increase in anaplasmosis. Do you think could that be that because no one was looking for that, it wasn't really on the radar and now you're searching for it, so you're finding more? Or are you saying just in the people that you see, which you always test for that, you're finding an increase in that?
Yeah, we always test for that, and we're just seeing more of that showing up in our office. And that's I talk to my colleagues about it, and they're like, I haven't seen many anaplasmosis patients, and I'm like, well, I'm starting to see more, and so okay, well, maybe I'll start testing for it.
Yeah, I had it. I mean, I don't know if I still have it.
Okay.
I don't know how. I think my understanding is that's a pretty hard one to make go away. If I'm remembering right, that one does not have um like there's no cell, help me if I'm trying to explain this not properly, but like there's no cell wall to that, so it's really hard to target it, or am I not understanding that properly?
No, I think anaplasmosis has a cell. I think Mike talked about mycoplasma
Okay.
that is,
I supposedly had that too.
yeah. So,
Um,
yeah, with anaplasmosis, there isn't a whole lot of research because there isn't as much funding or cases compared to Borrelia. So what we found is that a combination of different like homeopathic remedies. We had one woman come in and she had like really severe headaches, like a severe neurological case of it, and she was told by one of her medical providers, I can't treat you. You're going to die in a month. And it was just like, whoa. And I mean, she was still working, but it was like she would just have these like crushing headaches that was just due to multiple infections that in addition to anaplasmosis. And within 3 months, her infections, when we rescanned her, were 60% less. The anaplasmosis, the other ones that she had in her nervous system. And she was saying, like, I can work through the day and I don't feel like I have to like crawl, crash when I get home. I can, and she did other things too, like with EMFs, and, that really helped a lot. And so it's just understanding what are the biggest issues and then being very precise and targeted with them that makes patients heal more quickly from these like stealthy like anaplasmosis and mycoplasmas that we find in our patients.
and just for people who are listening that don't know, can you just elucidate a little bit more as to exactly what mycoplasma is, what is anaplasmosis, and what might some of those symptoms be for people?
So anaplasmosis well, also mycoplasma can be co-infections you can get from a tick bite. And anaplasmosis tends to, or at least in many of the patients that I see, infect the nervous system or affect the brain and can cause these really severe headaches. And what we often find is that, in addition to Lyme, this is one of the co-infections that they're dealing with, but often is not on the test, has not been tested for. And so what we found is we need to address often anaplasmosis in addition to Borrelia at the same time, or we sometimes have to deal with anaplasmosis first because the neurological symptoms are so intense for these patients. And with mycoplasma, what we find often our autoimmune patients have a stealthy mycoplasma infection. So, like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, they often have like, because it's a very small bacteria that can get into the joints and cause like arthritic symptoms, get in the brain. There's like over 100 species of mycoplasma. Often what we see is one called Mycoplasma hominis, and sometimes Mycoplasma pneumonia in respiratory issues. But those are the kind of the ones that we see. And they also can get in the intestines and cause, see small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or other kinds of, intestinal dysbiosis or disruption.
Okay.
So
And does mycoplasma come from a tick bite, or it's just an opportunistic pathogen that sees the moment and strikes because the immune system is dealing with some other issues?
it can be both. Like you can go into a theater and somebody sneezes and releases a cloud of mycoplasma pneumonia and you breathe it in. Or a tick goes,
Okay.
bites you and gives it to you that way. So it's
Okay.
very opportunistic in that way,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Yes. All right. And then can you talk to me a little bit more? So I didn't necessarily hear you say anything about nutrition. So,
So nutrition, well, is huge because it determines what kind of inflammation a patient has immediately after eating, what goes in their gut. So many of our patients are on anti-inflammatory, keto, the low lectin diet, which is a little more difficult. They may be on elimination diets. So that's one of the things we look for is like what foods are good for them in the scan that they won't have a big reaction to, and what also are ones that, that are inflammatory or, not good for them or increase their allergies.
okay.
So, yeah.
And is that so with lectins, what's the benefit of a low lectin diet?
Well, it helps reduce inflammation. It's Dr. Gundry's work that he's put out there. It is a rather restrictive diet. I had a patient try it and she was just like, it's so hard. I got to spend all my time shopping, making food, and, I don't have a life, other than making low lectin food or doing all this stuff. So, you know, if you have a personal chef, then it's probably a lot easier. But most people, I don't have one. I'd love to get one.
You and me both. I was like, that is something I could add to my list. I just said to someone, I was like, I need like a housekeeper for me. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think about the Brady Bunch and good old Alice.
There
And
you
I was
go.
like, I need me and Alice just for me. I don't, there's no one else here. And me and my dog. So she can take care of me and my dog.
Yeah,
Um,
if you're looking for a housekeeper position and you're a good chef, then contact Ann, all right?
Please do. Yes, thank you. And can you tell me a little bit more about like alkalinity? Does that, when you're looking at food choices for people, are you looking more towards alkaline foods, more acidic based? Doesn't really matter to you?
In our cancer patients, we are because it's more of an acidic condition in a patient supposedly is more, nourishing for the cancer or supportive of the cancer. So for those patients, they may be one more we may suggest more alkaline diet for them because that supposedly is more anti-cancer. With other patients, it's more like if they're have like gut inflammation, leaky gut, then things that don't increase inflammation and that help support like the healing of the gut. So whether it be like things like okra, which has lots of mucilaginous compounds in it that can help protect the gut, and things like we do a lot of supplements also. So things like short chain fatty acids, like butyrate, those can also help. Glutamine supplements to help. It's almost like spackling the little leaks in the intestine with that. So, probably in the scan, we probably look at over, 1,000 to 1,500 supplements for each patient to see which ones would address their inflammation, brain issues, infections, energy, most effectively. So,
Right.
we use a lot of different lines and so that helps us to hopefully reduce side effects and increase, how fast they can heal.
Yeah, cool. And can you have too many supplements?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, as our patients come in with their shopping bags full of supplements that they, saw somebody promote and they were like, tried it, it didn't work. And it's like it really depends on if a patient's gut can even assimilate, can absorb that. Some people have difficulty with that because, they're constipated because they have parasites or they have mold exposure that has stopped, limited their ability to absorb nutrients. Or if they have like, severe diarrhea and things are just not staying very long in their digestion tract. So we have to address the absorption issue often in patients and then look at, because you look at things from a Chinese medicine dietary perspective also, what encourages energy, what encourages healthy gut, movement. So we look at things through a different lens. I also work with a colleague of mine who's actually a nutritionist. And so he will, in our intakes, will provide consultation with patients around what might be a healthier diet to try. And so, yes, we diet is huge, because we hear the stories over and over again. We hear this one line from patients that go like, I went to that wedding and I saw that wedding cake and I thought, man, I have been so good for so many months. Oh, that looks so good. And I ate it. And the line that they always say is, I will never do that again. I felt horrible. I felt terrible.
Yes.
So, you have to being clean for a while. It's like, oh, that was working. And that shows them, because then they learn it in their body. Oh, yeah, that's really, I shouldn't eat that. So that's a really good experience for them.
Yeah.
And so I just wait for that, like, I will never do that again statement, like, yeah, got good learning. Keep going, stay on that diet.
It's kind of funny how that happens over time. And like I look back to what I used to eat, and if someone put that in front of me now, I would be insulted. I would be like, that is not food. Get that away from me. Like that is poison. And your body unlearns some of the bad habits that it learned, I think pretty quickly. Like it's hard in the beginning a little bit, but when you start to realize how much better you feel and how much of an impact it really does have, I mean, there's that whole adage, we are what we eat. Well, yes. And so if you're putting in garbage, you're going to get out garbage. And um, but again, if you were to give me fast food or something nowadays, like I can't even smell it. Like it doesn't even smell like food. It's so far removed from a nutritional standpoint, in my opinion, that it should just be taken off everyone's menu. But one person at a time, I suspect we'll get there.
Yeah.
You touched a little bit on mold too, so I'm curious, like if you had to guess, what percent of your patients have mold issues?
60%, probably over 60%, either through environmental mold exposure at home or work or their car, or they have, been taking a lot of antibiotics and that's disrupted their or cut down on their healthy probiotics. So then mold, fungal, pathogens can grow in their sinuses, their gut, their skin, and in some cases systemically, whether it be Candida or Aspergillus or Fusarium. Those are some of the top ones that we see in our scans with patients. So it's a big issue, and often that needs to be dealt with first in patients because if they're continually being exposed to these toxins, it's just like, hey, I'm getting better. And then, oh, I got poisoned again. I got better. Oh, I got poisoned again. It's like, it really impedes progress. So we encourage patients to address any sort of environmental mold exposure as quickly as possible, however they can, whether it is creating a clean room in their house, or I had, one of my patients, her dog chewed a hole in their drain pipe. So instead of the water draining away from the house, it drained into the crawl space. And she started having all these insomnia and anxiety attacks, especially when in her bedroom, which was right near where it was getting all moldy. And then they discovered this. Hopefully, they put dog-proof covers on their drain pipes now, and they had to move out and pay for remediation, of the crawl space, the house, and it was just like a very, disruptive experience for them. And before that, she felt like, I'm doing really well. Her Lyme wasn't showing up in her scans, and it's like, yeah, I'm doing great. And then it's like, bam, another thing. And unfortunately, I think Dr. Shoemaker, there's over 50% of the buildings out there have water damage. So whether it be homes or, commercial offices and things like that. So
Yeah, that's
it's,
interesting too that you have about a 60% breakdown, because I thought about it with my podcast, and it's like I think it's probably about 60% of the people that I interview had mold issues in conjunction with the Lyme, and until they dealt with the mold part, they didn't get better from the Lyme part.
yeah,
And I do think, again, going back to what I originally started the show off with, was just the thought that we can only encompass so many environmental toxins before the dam bursts. And I think a lot of us are walking around with some strains of Lyme in the body probably just fine. And then we get either major trauma, exposed to mold and heavy loads, or something along those lines that initiates just uh, hell being unleashed inside the body.
Yeah. So what it is something that we continually look for in our scans. We can scan for over 40 different species of mold and I think about 30 something mycotoxins. Um, and so we often find Aspergillus is number one, especially in our farmer patients. Like we had one man, we're right near Johns Hopkins.
Yeah.
And he'd been to Johns Hopkins 37 times over a whole decade. And he had been given multiple diagnoses, multiple medications, multiple specialists. And he was, yeah, I'm better and worse, worse, worse. And eventually got to the point where he said, I can't even add two numbers in my head. And I'm the one who does the books for the entire farm. And normally I'd be getting up at like 4 in the morning and getting out and taking care of the cows and all that stuff. I'm sleeping into 11 because I'm so fatigued. And so he told his wife, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to live this life anymore. And she goes, we're going to this new place I found that's right nearby here. And so we scanned him and we found he had three infections that Hopkins had missed. He had Aspergillus mold in his sinuses because often a lot of farm buildings, they're not air conditioned. It's very humid here in Maryland, so perfect mold environment. He also had brucellosis, which is also something you can get from a tick-borne transmission, and he also had Clostridia in his gut. So these three things were totally not on the radar of his other medical providers. And so we're like, hey, we need to treat these things because when you get mold in your sinuses, the toxins can then just go right into the brain through the lymphatic system, through just the nasal bone's really thin. So it's like this is the front door to your brain, and you got to clean that out. So we had him do nasal washes with this power washer that called a NasoNeb. Now, most people have done like neti pots who we work with, and it's like that's kind of like a little squirt gun. This is like, you're getting out the big power washer and you're blasting stuff through the sinuses. So when you look at it, it'll shoot a mist that's like 3 to 4 feet long. And that we put in essential oils, could be like thyme, essential oil, also ionic silver, hypochlorous acid from Briotech is what we often use. And they're using that to clean out and get the biofilms, get the toxins, get the mold. He also had heavy metals in there also. And I had one of my people that I taught this to, and he says, first time I did it, I had something this long come out my nose. It was like a white, I don't know, it was a biofilm or a what? It wasn't a worm or anything, but oh my God, I couldn't believe it. Because the rear sinuses are often the ones that have the marcons or the biofilms, or there could be mycoplasma, candida, and so on. And as you start to use the more powerful NasoNeb, that stuff gets flushed out. And it could be people who, when you have mold, unfortunately, they can colonize the sinuses. You get postnasal drip going back the throat, back the throat, and it goes into the gut, and then it starts to colonize the intestines. So with this farmer patient, we put him on different homeopathics for the brucellosis, for the mold in his system, and also did a lot of, herbals, essential oils for Clostridia. And he would come in for treatments. We do the cupping and bloodletting. We do frequency specific microcurrent. Also, another thing we do is something called hydrogen therapy, where patients are inhaling a combination of hydrogen and oxygen. And what that does, it's super anti-inflammatory. And since hydrogen is such a small molecule, it'll go right through the blood-brain barrier and start to detox, start to lower inflammation in the brain. And in different research studies, it lowers things like tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1 beta, interleukin 6. And these are often elevated in our Lyme and mold patients. And in fact, I'd love to share a free download with listeners they can get, if that's okay, at lymeresearchcenter.com/silver. Since this is the Silver Limings podcast, we'll put it out there and you can get that. and just enter your information, and we'll just send it to your inbox. And those are the things that we are using that are clinically effective in currently in our with our patients and creating the best improvements in Lyme and mold patients. So homeopathics, essential oils, herbals, frequencies with microcurrent, also peptides is another thing we use there's one called KPV, which has like anti-candida properties. Also, it helps with, because we get patients because they're exposed to mold, their mast cells are going crazy, pumping out all this histamine, and they become highly reactive. Like if they eat certain things, get exposed, they get anaphylactic and they have to go to the ER and get epinephrine and things like that. So we have, unfortunately, kid patients that are highly reactive to their food. So it's their parents are like, is there anything you can do? So I said, hey, try this peptide because it stabilizes mast cell activation. And the patient would take it and they're like, hey, I feel a lot better. And they go back to eating, unfortunately, the processed foods that or whatever Doritos or whatever it was for that one kid. And they're like, yeah, I'm good now. I'm like, you know, well, so much for trying to get the diet change. It's much harder in the younger patients, you
For
know.
sure. For
But
sure.
since they're not going to the ER, the parents were like, "Oh man, thank you so much," because sitting in the ER till 3 or 4 in the morning waiting for the doc to get to us. You saved us a huge amount of stress in our lives. So that's another one of the remedies in our toolbox. That's amazing. So
That's
yeah,
cool. I've not heard of that one before. And you also brought up something else that I don't really hear a lot about, but I've been learning more about Marcons and just the importance of understanding about that. And I just finished a mold and SIRS chronic inflammatory response syndrome training, and they were talking about Marcons, and I was like, huh. And I had another guest on my show before that mentioned it, and I was like, what is that even? I don't even know what that is.
yeah,
So
it's drug-resistant staph. Dr. Shoemaker found it in his patients sinuses 2 weeks after they've been on antibiotics. And so these create again toxins, inflammation in the sinuses, which then can leak into the brain, creating brain fog, neurological issues, and also insomnia. So when our patients do like the Nasoneb with anti-staph, anti-MRSA essential oils, again, it could be things like clove bud, very low dose, because it's a very strong antimicrobial, and other essential oils that can help buffer things like lavender. That often helps clear the Marcons more faster. Could be ionic silver also that they're putting in there. So that just really gets them out, not only the front sinuses, but the rear sinuses, where they're often just kind of hanging out and creating problems.
yeah, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, how many, in your experience, how many people, this is always something that I've thought about, how many people would you say have something like Lyme and then it manifests into cancer? Do you see a lot of that?
I actually don't see a ton of that.
Great.
Um, Mostly the cancer patients that we see, they have either a genetic issue or toxic exposure, or could be because they smoked or whatever, or melanomas, or colon cancers. Those are the ones that we do see. But it's usually, surprisingly, not a lot of Lyme cancer patients. So,
Yeah, good. Good. Because I always kind of felt like maybe something like Lyme, renders the immune system defunct and then other things start to go awry in the body, such as cancer. And
Mhm.
I haven't, I can't say I've too many people, a fair amount of people that had Lyme and then suddenly they got cancer, and just kind of wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Mhm.
Um, can you also speak to the thought about probiotics? So I hear some people are like, probiotics are so bad, your body can naturally produce the good bacteria. And then I've got other people in the other camp that are like, no way, you need probiotics. You should be taking those every day to help your gut heal. How do you feel about probiotics?
Probiotics are great, man. They're, we use prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics, neurobiotics, combinations of all those things. And it depends. That's another thing we look at in the scan is because, again, a lot of our patients have gut issues where, like this, the farmer with a Clostridia, he was on a specific orthomolecular probiotic, and that really helped him to go from having, really slow intestinal, because when you have the aspergillus toxins, it can paralyze the peristalsis in the colon. And so, as you're repopulating and clearing out those toxins from the mold, then the gut starts to work better. So, he began to have more normal bowel movements. So, probiotics are huge. I mean, I think we're just scraping the surface on how important they are because we have more microbial like DNA on our bodies than human DNA. It was a 10 times or 100 times more microbe DNA. So we have are highly dependent. I don't think we could live without, probiotics, or at least a healthy microbiome. Uh, we're not a sterile, living in a sterile body. So it's huge.
Um, is there a time when the body gets to like true optimal health that you wouldn't need any support from anything anymore ever because you're just impenetrable?
I'm waiting for that moment for myself. I haven't got there yet, personally. There's always like insults or toxins or, whatever. Like I was just recently at a wedding of my niece and I ate some, believe it or not, dried coconut and I got food poisoning from it. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, it's just coconut. I didn't have that much. And it was just like, oh. And so fortunately, I had, charcoal and other remedies for healing inflammation in the gut and all this stuff. So it did take me several days to recover from that. So we're exposed to all sorts of, air, water, food, people's negative energies, uh, the political climate, it's just all these things can affect us emotionally, energetically. And so, yes, our goal is to help patients have more resilience, have more internal, what we call light within, and to help give them ways that they can build that up and nourish that so things aren't as able to penetrate in. In Chinese medicine, they talk about your Wei Qi or your defensive energy. And defensive energy is around your body. It's also inside around your organs and all this. And there's different ways to cultivate that, to strengthen that. And it could be simple as going for a walk and not getting bit by a tick. And, or you do whatever makes you happy. And could be you're doing a craft. It could be, in China, they do a lot of Tai Chi or Qigong, practices to try to increase that energy. And, it's really something that some patients will put into practice to really help increase that internal energy, that light within, and that can help them tremendously become more resilient.
Yeah, that's fair. I imagined that the answer was no, that people cannot necessarily be completely impenetrable, but you can definitely build up your resilience and find ways, obviously, to stay stronger, strengthen the immune system, strengthen the light within. I like that image a lot. We talk about ojas and in Ayurveda, your life force energy.
Yep.
And I'm still thinking about when you're talking about clearing bad energies for people, I'm like, maybe that should come first.
Well, not everybody's ready to do that, So when they get detox, they have energy, they're not as emotionally anxious or depressed or hopeless. Then they built up resilience, they're starting to clear affections and they're regenerating with, peptides and things like that. Then it may be at times we have patients that talk about, I feel like this thing is in and I can't get it out. that's when we had that conversation with him. And like we had this one, he was a brilliant, he's still very brilliant, brilliant college kid when he came to us. And he was like, I'm, been to my Lyme doc in New Jersey and I intravenous and I got better. Then I relapsed and whatever she did afterward, it didn't help. So I'm here now. And so we scanned him and we found that he had been treated for Borrelia, but he also had neurological babesia that, was missed. And so we treated him with different homeopathics and other remedies, and we found that everything was getting better. His energy, his joint pain, and at several months into it, he goes like, I have this one thing that's really not improved. And it's like, I can't access my short-term memory. And I'm like, okay, so what'd you have for dinner like 2 days ago? He's like, I don't know. He was so smart. He could like think about things and piece things together. But he did memory testing and the memories were blocked. They were there, but he couldn't access them. So Babesia is like malaria, it can get in the nervous system. And so he said, okay, we really need to discharge, we really need to clear this neurological infection. So for him, what we did, we had him do a nasal infusion of saline and bee venom. And bee venom has a peptide called melatonin in it, which inhibits Lyme, mycoplasma, and protozoa like Babesia. I haven't seen any research specific on Babesia, but like Giardia and toxoplasmosis, it has efficacy against them. So I said, hey, let's see if this can really clear things out. And he had this huge Herxheimer reaction. I mean, it felt like he said, whoa, I feel like there's like all this like inflammation and pressure in my head. And I'm like, okay, so now we need to get that stuff out. So we did the cupping and bloodletting on his neck and his shoulders, and all this like thick, dark gunk came out. And within 30 minutes after the cupping, he's like, okay, I'm all better. And I looked at him like, are you sure? I mean, that was huge. Like, I mean, and he's like a 20-year-old at this point, and he's like, yeah, I'm fine. And he's drives home 3.5 hours. On the way home, he gets a call from a friend. He was in college. He had to drop out because he got sick. He hadn't talked to in several years. And so he's talking to the guy, blah, 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 gets off the phone, hangs up, calls me afterwards and says, hey, I just got off the phone with a friend I haven't talked to in 3 years. I'm remembering things I haven't remembered in a long time. Thanks. And
Oh,
so since the Herxheimer was huge, we kept doing it in the office until the Herxheimer was like minimal. And then he says, okay, you can do this at home on a daily basis to clear out the neurological Lyme, Babesia that may be there. And now he's like no longer living at home, working at a burger joint. He's happy living, has his own business on the West Coast, and has a family and all this stuff. And he feels like the last time I talked to him was actually a week ago. I'm doing great. Thanks. So it is possible to recover from these, especially severe neurological infections, but it's just a matter of finding the right tools at the right time in the right dose, not just going with all guns blazing, but layers like an onion.
yes, yes. Well, I appreciate you sharing all of this because I do think this will help a lot of people. Again, one of the most popularly asked questions is how do I get better? And I think you've laid out a pretty concise plan. And just from my knowing of what I do know, I feel like this is a really cohesive and thoughtful process that you're going through, taking patients through. You're not just, again, detonating nuclear bombs all over and expecting to kill everything. And too bad for them if they, have major Herx reactions. Or a lot of times people will be like, well, I tried this antibiotic and I couldn't tolerate it. And so then I stopped treatment, and it's like, that's really not the idea either, right? We want people to be able to recover and regain their health. And if we're making it so uncomfortable for them to do so, that's a big deterrent. And so what's their alternative? Just to go back to living in a sick existence? That's not really that exciting. There's got to be a better way forward for people. And so again, this to me sounds like a very well thought out gradual progression into peeling back the layers of the onions. Definitely a good way of describing how this goes. And it's not always a straightforward path to healing, but there are going to be some days where you peel back and you find five more layers and you're like, okay, crap, that's not that exciting for me. But if people were interested to work with you, Greg, what's the best plan of action for them to contact you? So I've got your information. Is that the best way for them to just reach out and email you or call you or reach out to the center? How help people with that, please?
They can email us at goodbyelyme.com. You can email us on our web. You can go there, go to the contact page on our website. There's also, you can call us 301-228-3764. And we've been blessed to have worked with over 1,000 patients. So this is something that has been refined, for 3 decades because we've been treating patients, for over 30 years now. And so it would be our honor to talk with you and see how we may be able to help you, based on our advanced scan and then also this 8-stage process that we take people through to make sure we handle the hidden stealthy infections or the biofilms or the hypercoagulation, the deep bad spirit, bad energies, the toxins, inflammation, all these things. It's something that we look at and try to help people get better more quickly around.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Just a final question too, in terms of the population that you work with. So I gather it's not just people with Lyme disease that you're helping, that you do work with people with cancer. Is there really anyone that wouldn't be a good fit to contact you?
People with advanced like ALS, we have not had really good results with. That's, um, genetic diseases, some genetic diseases, just because we haven't found a way to address things on a genetic level. Um, those are kind of like the two categories that, I kind of tell people that, our success rate is not very good with.
Okay.
So, but but earliest stages of ALS, we have much better results with because often there's neurological Lyme. That's the issue. So, depending on their ability to take the Herxheimer reaction, then they can do things like bee venom, which, delivered nasally gets right into the nervous system. Hydrogen helps detox the brain really quickly. So we have some very advanced tools that most Lyme literate practitioners aren't using at this time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And also we have that download at lymeresearchcenter.com/silver, in all caps, SILVER, where we can get our top 5 treatments for Lyme and mold. And just send that to your inbox.
Yep, perfect. Thanks. I'm going to be doing that as soon as we get off here. And again, I'm just really grateful for your willingness to share as much as you have with my listeners, because this is really exciting in my opinion. It makes a lot of sense to me. Again, the process that you use and the breadth of what you're looking for in people, because I think that's a lot of times I try to explain to people, you've got to look for co-infections, you've got to look for underlying root causes, and many times that's not addressed when they're seeing their standard doctor, or even in some Lyme literate practitioners. I've had people going for years and then I'm like, did you get checked for mold? And they're like, no. And I'm like, what? How is your Lyme literate practitioner not looking for this kind of thing in you? And so it's unfortunate because they've now invested years of their life and finances and whatever else into trying to fix themselves from Lyme, and really are just spinning their wheels. So I think, again, I've not gone through your process personally, but listening to what you're explaining to me, it's like, I endorse you, Greg. I believe in this. And I think that this is really a beautiful thing. And I'm excited for people to have success with you. And do people have to come to you in person, or you're able to help people online?
We work with a partner to do remote treatment. So you're actually working with a colleague of ours, and you're really their patient, and we're a consultant to them. And to work directly with us, we do need to just do an initial, we have a 5-hour intake. We're actually doing a scan for 2 hours, and then we have different remedy testing and then treatments that will start in that first appointment to really get improvement as quickly as possible. So instead of waiting months, it's hopefully weeks, or in some cases days, where people will feel like, wow, that I feel like better. Like we had one woman from Canada, she's actually an integrative medicine practitioner. And I was like, why are you here? Because you can get intravenous, you can get all these supplements, you can get all this stuff. And she goes like, I have really bad brain fog and nothing is touching it. So we did hydrogen therapy on her first, and within 30 minutes, she goes, my brain fog's 50% better. And then an hour, my brain fog's 80% better. How much? And I went, how much what? How much is it? So she ended up buying a unit or has her patients get hydrogen therapy. And she's like, instead of crashing at the end of the day, I have more energy, I have more vitality, and I am so much more grateful that I can have this device to share with my patients and feel so much better with. So yeah, lots of stories about success stories like that.
Good job. We'll keep up the good work and keep spreading the light and the love because people really need it. And again, 400 to 600,000 people a year alone are infected with Lyme and tick-borne illness. So that's a really large chunk of our population that's probably really needing some help like what you're providing. So thank you for being there for people.
Well, thank you for helping me get to share what we're doing and helping more people. I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to help as many people we can connect with.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you, Greg, very much.
Thank you.
Bye.